Hi, so we're feeling sick, but we need to record something because this video needs to happen. So, if that's why it sounds weird, then this is why. I'm sorry. We're very sick. Feeling. Okay, I hope all of you get better soon. Uh, Please enjoy the video. Comedy is a weird genre because a lot of writers these days don't really treat it as a genre per se, so much as sort of a checkbox for stories to tick off. Everyone wants to laugh, especially in these troubled times, etc., etc., so everything that is trying to appeal to a broad audience needs to be funny somehow. But because comedy is so subjective and what makes people laugh varies wildly between individuals and depends so heavily on their life experiences and personal outlooks, comedy written for a broad audience tends to be flat. Lots of mainstream Hollywood films of this time try to force humor in scenes where it isn't needed, with jokes that often aren't funny, seemingly to fill some arbitrary laugh quota. While comedy is highly subjective, as I've already acknowledged, I have my own personal working theory on what makes comedy in narrative media funny. And it's quite simple, really. It's not about telling any certain number of jokes, or a matter of injecting humor into an otherwise dramatic scene. It's about creating a scenario that is in and of itself funny, that breeds humor by naturally producing jokes that express the story, and crucially, express the type of people that these characters are. Machikado Mazoku, the Spy Family, and Yuri Yuri all achieve this exceptionally. It helps certainly that animation as a medium is more suited to physical and visual comedy, which is not to say that it can't be done well in live action, just that it's easier to pull off in a medium where you aren't dealing with, humans, but animated characters whose appearance and every motion is deliberate and purposefully dictated by the creators. My overall point being that Kaguya-sama wa Kokuratsutai Tensaitachi no Renai Zono Sen is really damn funny, and it's for the simple reason that it just is. It is funny. It has the essential quality of humor. Because the scenario that it invokes of two people romantically and sexually interested in each other being too embarrassed and anxious to put forth the simple question of would you like to go out with me? It's a scenario that's relatable, but also really fucking funny because when you think about it, the fact that you, as a teenager, couldn't just talk to them is embarrassing. In fact, it's cringe AF. And Kaguya just lets that scenario breathe and takes the genius route of framing it as a battle, complete with an epic sports commentator spelling out simple social rules and emotional manipulation tactics as if they are some sort of secret arts of wars. It's neat, and by earnestly leaning into this scenario, by adding the brilliant comedic twist of casting the child of an aristocrat and an academic prodigy in its narrative, by just letting their lived experiences be hilarious, as lived experience often is, and by just being good and unique and letting all characters of both genders be realistically flawed people of their age group, it becomes one of the best romantic comedy anime in recent memory. Other than Machikado. Wow. I don't need to tell you that Kaguya, the critically acclaimed romantic comedy anime that everyone says is good, do I? Everyone else already told you that. And they were right. I mean, sometimes I, Joyce Stick, a weird trans bitch and infamous F-lister of anime YouTube and AMV YouTube and leftist YouTube, don't agree with the popular consensus. But in this case, yeah, I do. The normies were right this time. Kaguya-sama is a good anime, and it is funny, while also being broadly popular and appealing. I guess it is possible, huh? Well, then again, it didn't have to try very hard, I guess. So this isn't like a big deal sort of analysis. I just have been watching and enjoying Kaguya, and I feel like talking about the parts that I like. So I'm just going to list off some of the observations that I have that I think are funny, and things I like. I like Fujiwara. I think she's got a really fun personality, and the fact that she's constantly trying to find her own weird, esoteric ways of fun because her strict parents don't let her play video games is really relatable and really good. I think it's awesome how her antics keep shaking up the dynamic in the student council and being a huge stick in the mud, hampering Kaguya and Shirogane from just talking to each other. Ugh, hampering. Sure, why not? Why shouldn't we use the word hampering? Because, not wanting to make things awkward with your love interest when your friend is around. That's an experience. And that's a thing that the story keeps taking advantage of for comedy. I really like how the series openly acknowledges that these teenagers want to have sex with each other. Because, they do. A lot of teenage romance stories would probably be enriched if they acknowledged the simple fact that teenagers want to have sex, and also that many teenagers don't want to have sex, and that is okay too. Not to say that acknowledging that fact would make every romance story better, because it definitely does not, but in Kaguya's specific case, it makes the character's attitudes towards sex a central part of the narrative and happily establishes that it's not off limits as a subject matter, thus resulting in the one scene where Fujiwara tries really, really hard to make Kaguya make a dick joke, a scene which, yes, probably because I'm a very mature person, made me laugh some of the hardest and longest laughs I've had in my life. For this scene alone, I thank you, Fujiwara Chika, you wonderful and perfect mad scientist of young love. I love Hayasaka. Hayasaka is a very cool love battle mate. Hayasaka is a great wing woman. I think it's really good when Kaguya just wants to have a normal teenage life hanging out with her friends, but her parents are being controlling helicopter parents who don't respect her individuality or autonomy and are quite frankly, like almost all parents, abusive pieces of human trash. And Hayasaka takes Kaguya's side and helps her sneak out of the house, at the risk of losing her whole entire job, and she pulls it off like a pro. And she helps with Kaguya's relationship and sex education. Again, like a pro. She teaches Kaguya safe bondage. Ah, what a wonderful woman. I think it's really perfect and hilarious that the side couple in this series of Kashiwagi and Tanuma both go to Kaguya and Shirogane for advice, and they're both very uncertain that their advice will be good or helpful at all whatsoever. But they do their best anyways, both just basically saying, hey, just talk to each other, and it works out for them. It's so great that the couple who ultimately have a very nice, good, and healthy dating relationship got there by taking the advice of these two disaster dumbass teenagers who are both dumbasses too big to take their own damn advice. I like that the soundtrack to Kaguya-sama is extremely good. It's extremely 80s feeling, even though this show is definitely not set in the 80s. I think this show definitely understands teenagers and how they operate, and expresses that in a very nice and exaggerated way. I think it's nice how all the girls are friends, and kinda adorable that some of the girls seem to have crushes on each other, but not realize that they are having crushes on each other, or that they can act on those thoughts at all. Because of course these messy, confused, rich teenagers who barely get away with being het don't know that being gay is okay. Fujiwara does not know how much of an entire lesbian she is. Also, as someone who was born into a relatively wealthy, upper middle class family, who now refuses to help me meaningfully financially because I didn't dance to their tune, and as a result, I've since found myself in a not insignificant position of poverty. Yay, life. Anyway, I think it's neat how this story expresses how being a rich kid sucks for totally different reasons than being a poor kid. Like, rich people and aristocrats are obviously all bad, but that just kinda means that the kids of rich people and aristocrats are obviously all abused, albeit in a more insidious and less obvious manner than blatant emotional trauma or physical violence. Kaguya, as I've already mentioned, is controlled by her father and their money, and that is a type of violence, and that is an experience that I also had, on top of blatant emotional trauma and physical violence. Yeah, I've had a real fun life. Anyway, it's my personal belief that Kaguya is abused by her family, who is bad. And if Kaguya was to openly rebel against her family, she'd probably be disowned by them, or disinherited as she'd say, which would lock her out of their wealth and probably also place her in poverty. So that's a very not insignificant chain around her neck. Oh, and Kaguya is left-handed, and her abusive family raised her to write right-handed. Because they're abusive, obviously. So that's also true. Shirogane, meanwhile, is definitely not born of wealth, given that he's the child of a single father and has to work multiple part-time jobs to support his father and sister, which is its own kind of abuse, albeit one that his father isn't responsible for so much. Obviously, capitalism is... I like Kei. I think she's a good girl. Although it does suck that her and Miyuki's upbringing makes it difficult for them to get along, but you know, good drama and stuff. Also, Miyuki's dad is pretty cringe according to Miyuki, but in my opinion, a pretty cool and based dad. Rock on, dude. It's nice how the story casually expresses how Shirogane's difficult family life has an impact on him. With all the responsibilities he's taken on, making him constantly sleep deprived, and how this character trait is something that the series isn't afraid to comically exploit. Because as an insomniac myself, yeah, being sleep deprived is tragic and makes life more difficult, but also, it can make life really unpredictable and in hindsight, fucking hilarious. I also really like Ino Miko's introduction in the second season. I think it's nice how she's introduced in an antagonistic role as a threat to the personal freedom and relationships of the student council, but then she's made sympathetic in the episode where the student election happens. It's really relatable how she's had such difficulties making friends because of how devoted she is to her ideal of living a proper life, and she doesn't feel that she's truly strong until Shirogane comes and debates her, and in his regarding of Miko as an equal, reveals to her her true inner strength. It's a really powerful moment, and I definitely cried quite a fair bit. Shirogane risking his own victory to help Miko become more assured of her own personal sense of morals and righteousness and identity. It's nice. It's a nice moment, and I appreciate it very much. It's also just really nice and hilarious and funny how Miko's an uptight disciplinary committee member who is confused by the perceived indecency of her fellow student council members having fun doing all these ridiculous things, but she's all confuzzled by the fact that she finds it fun too, that they're all so nice to her. But it's not that she hates fun, it's just that she has a different idea of fun, because she's never had a healthy social life with different friends she could cut loose with. And that's just really nice and good and sweet and wholesome, and realistic in how awkward it is, how if you're an outsider in an in-group, it can be really alienating and confusing, but still, it's worth trying to get along with and hang out with people you don't understand. It's worth trying to get to know people walking different life paths, who have different ideas of fun than you, which Ishigami's relationship with the cheer squad also plays into really well. Oh, by the way, this moment alone, qualifies Miko as one of the very best girls. And we include the moment where Miko says the disciplinary committee's job is to seize trust from the grown-ups. There, please do that, future Joyce. Thank you. Hello, people watching this video. I'm Audrey of the Joystick System, as in the plural system that both I and Joyce are now a part of and have been for a little over 2 months now. If you're wondering what a plural system, also called multiplicity, is, it's the subjective experience of 2 or more individuals sharing a body. Subjective does not mean that it isn't real, it means that it's subjective, as in not everyone experiences it, and every system experiences it differently. And if your reaction to this is that it's fake or whatever, I'd like to ask you, how do you know if you're a single person? You're just a walking flesh bottle with a consciousness, and it's really no more ridiculous to believe that there's one person inside this sack of meat shit than it is to believe there's 2 or 3 or a dozen. Being an alive thing is ridiculous and surreal and nonsensical, and life likes to throw you curveballs and upend everything you thought you were right about.
so get used to it. Anyway, I exist primarily because of Joyce's emotional anguish and depression, and because I needed to be here to handle things that she wasn't feeling up to, like editing this video, which I also still wasn't quite up to, because I have my own particular sensitivities to our brain screwiness garbage. So the reason why this video is so sloppy, because we didn't feel like finishing it properly, but we needed to finish it kind of, so I finished it enough that it's watchable. Also, the Kaguya anime's distribution is handled by Aniplex, and when you make videos about any anime whose distribution is handled by Aniplex, you tend to get a copyright strike about 5 times faster than normal. And we're fucking tired this month, and all the months, and this video was supposed to be finished quickly, and it isn't. And the summer heat is going to get so much worse because Civilization is, as we know, currently in the process of being gleefully emulated. And we'd rather talk about anime. Anyway, thanks to our patrons who've enabled us that so far, despite our slowness in releasing content lately. And especially thanks to Bree, Cassandra, Dorian Newlin, Eliza Tantavi, Hikari no Yume, Nishwert, Sally, Scimitar, Zven Lupov, and Tis. So, did y'all notice that Kaguya is a plural system? Kaguya is a plural system. If you haven't noticed, well, sorry, I guess, to blow your mind. Meanwhile, if you're a manga reader, you're hopefully going back there, going, I see, I guess. But you really should have been able to pick this up on Season 2 when Kaguya and her headmates did an Ace Attorney in Headspace. If you're not believing me, well, Kaguya's other personalities have their own pages on the wiki, which is not the most complete of wikis, but still. The Kaguya manga is tagged under dissociative identities on A-List. The manga's next arc that's to be adapted in Season 4 is going to deal with Kaguya's plurality in somewhat more detail, so I've heard. And I have been told by my good friend Jolene of Student of Eth that the arc coming up in the manga next is one of her favorite arcs thus far, and she likes it. And I'm sure we'll also like it. So, the anime content, which is all we've perused, isn't really sufficiently deep enough in this regard for us to found some deeper discussions of plurality in this video. But maybe we'll do that later, when we get around to the manga and decide to make a separate video. However, if you're particularly looking for some other particularly deeper plural perspectives, I might recommend my aforementioned friend Jolene, who wrote about the empathetic, albeit imperfect, depiction of the plural protagonists of Kara no Kyokai. I intend to get around to watching Kara no Kyokai at some point after I finish editing this video and have a drink of water. Because I'm not an unhinged alcoholic like Joyce is. Back to her then.
Final loose observation. So, Season 3 has a whole comical miscommunication about who Shirogane wants to rap for. After Hayasaka, who needs to keep her job as Kaguya's professional battle maid, total secret, dresses up as an effeminate homosexual boy so that Fujiwara will not recognize her. This breaks Fujiwara's brain. Later, she overhears from Kei that Miyuki's love interest is not Kaguya, but in fact, Harasaka, which leads her to the mistaken conclusion that Miyuki and Harasaka are having homosexual sex. This further breaks Fujiwara's brain, thus triggering the Fujiwara becomes a Fujoshi arc, which isn't really an arc insofar as it's a small series of gags that I extrapolated the story from. I mean, because it did tell a story. We didn't extrapolate the thing that happened. In the middle of Fujiwara Joshi's rapping with Shirogane, Fuji Joshiwara? Gosh damn. She drops an improvisedly casually homophobic lyric where she expresses that she's not really sure about that being gay thing that the boys are doing. Play that line. However, by the end of the scene, she tearfully weeps for Miyuki and Harasaka, and declares that male relationships are so beautiful. And this is, an example of the whole misunderstood as gay trope, and that's not perfect. I feel like pointing out how particularly relatable this is. As a teenager, in my experience, you're very likely to be homophobic just because you're, well, a teenager, raised heteronormatively. And given Fujiwara's character background as the daughter of prominent elite politicians, and her inferred strict upbringing, it's pretty sensible to think that she's had a very heteronormative upbringing and has never considered if being gay was okay, or if she approves of homosexuality. Not to say that that's okay, but the fact is, as a teenager with limited life and social experiences, and who has, as Fujiwara does, absolutely no sense of tact, it's pretty realistic for a teenager to suddenly say something ambiguously homophobic like this in a social situation like this. Citation needed? My entire life. I may now be an ostensibly raging homosexual on leave from being non-single, as has been chronicled far too extensively for my home good, but surprise, surprise, someone raised in a homophobic society, used to be a little bit homophobic. And I said some pretty bigoted things once that I would say were way worse than what Fujiwara said in this episode. And I'm not saying that because I'm trying to, score Twitter points or BreadTube points or whatever. It's just kind of the truth. And it's also pretty realistic that one pretty quick way that teenagers will end up less homophobic is by A, meeting gay people, and B, being gay themselves. Obviously, this is not universally true, as there are plenty of gay people, or people who know gay people, who are still homophobic, but in my case, my homophobia sort of eroded away over the ensuing years after I suddenly had a crush on a close guy friend of mine as a yet-to-crack egg, and that just happens. Fujiwara overcomes her socially ingrained homophobia and becomes a teary Fujoshi. That is what this small plot point conveys to me, at least. I think that's pretty great. So yeah, I think that's a good amount of observations I've made right here. I now want to talk about one of my favorite parts of the series thus far. Anyway, so there's this one scene in Season 1, Episode 9, where by ordinary circumstances, as well as her own genius foolishness, Kaguya has wound up sick and in bed from a cold. So, Shirogane, by way of ordinary circumstances, as well as his own ability to win at a needlessly convoluted card game, goes to visit her. Kaguya is extremely out of it, and without thinking, drags Shirogane into her bed, and nothing actually happens between them. Really actually nothing. They don't kiss, they don't have sex, they don't even cuddle. But when Kaguya wakes up with Shirogane in her bed, not sure of what the hell happened, it causes a great fuss. They both cordially apologize and everything and all, but it still bothers them a lot. And the following episode, they have a fight, they're both on pretty bad terms, and they then both simultaneously seek the counsel of their respective same-sex friends. The conversations that ensue are perhaps some of the most wow conversations. They're both mutually frustrated because they both feel like they were taken advantage of, but also they both wanted something to happen. And it's an entire mood. Both these scenes particularly really stick out to me as so brilliantly illustrative of the issue with being both of these genders and interacting with people of the other genders. I guess I'll just play some clips of it.
Slept together, I assume.
That's terrible! So vile! What a creep!
It's possible that she's the one who initiated, but she was out of it, so she doesn't remember.
I don't care! The girl wasn't in a coherent state of mind, then that boy had absolutely no business being—
That's a rational way to see it, yes? It was immoral for him to do it, right? right.
She invites a guy into her bed and then berates him for it the very next day? She has no morals! She's trouble with a capital T. If this chick were a character in a typical romantic comedy manga, she would have dark hair and no boobs.
It just keeps...
I don't care how high her temperature was. I bet the reason she was so confident about pulling a guy into bed is because she's done it before. She's the type that says she's not interested in men, but sinks her teeth right into them if they're handsome enough. If men are wolves, women are snakes. And their venom is almost always lethal. So if you ask me...
And you know, both of these attitudes, that only men can sexually assault women, that women are conniving bitches who will play the victim to make men look bad, both of these attitudes are bad and not true. I've been a boy who dealt with those very entire anxieties around girls, and the idea that the man is the one who should take responsibility, that the man is the one at fault if anything happens, and all. And then I became a girl, anxious about maybe I'm not a girl, because I have a dick, and that means I can rape girls. Probably it was. Very extremely whoosh when that happened, when breakdowns in communication in my own sex life happened, and I blamed myself thinking, I'm a boy after all. I must not have been doing the right thing. But you know, the fact of the matter is actually that miscommunications happen. Relationships are hard, people are flawed, people get sick, and gender lines are just yet another social barrier which makes communication hard. And boundaries aren't really so clear or easy as your sex ed class probably wanted to tell you, if you even had a sex ed class. And it's like, oh wow gosh, these two dumb kids made an error because they're teenagers, and they're making a lot of silly mistakes because of their lack of experience. Yeah, that does happen, and it would be really easy for this series to take the side of either Kaguya or Shirogane and make the other out to be the guilty party in this incident, but instead they just both start to talk, and they just mutually talk to each other about what they did and what they wanted, and it's awkward and difficult, because it always is. But they ultimately reconcile and both come out stronger and more mature for mutually acknowledging their mistake. So that's just genuinely good. They talk to each other. They learn from each other. Progress is made. Progress is made. It's good. It's seriously, genuinely good. And that's what I have to say. Kaguya is a very funny and good series, and I might have more to say about it later, but I'm satisfied for now with what I had to say for now. Yeah, thanks for watching. Good night.